Test, test. Looks like it works. Welcome. Before we get started, if you'll join me, please rise and for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the Thank you. Thank you for coming. And first of all, I'd like to introduce our special guest today who needs no introduction, Senator Mike Lee. Senator, thanks for joining. Senator Lee's been invited here to rake me over the coals on your behalf and see what comes up. By way of introduction of myself, my name is Jason Walton, and of course I'm running for the United States Senate. Very excited. I'm having a lot of fun. I live here in Provo, but originally I'm from the Four Corners area, Monticello, Utah. Is anyone here from that area? Okay, hopefully we have some people from the San Juan who are watching us online. I'm fifth generation from there, so just my great-grandfather was actually lowered over the cliffs and barrels to set charges during the Hole in the Rock expedition back in the 1880s. Family was one of the five founding families of this town of Monticello, and that's where all of our family's been raised. Then eventually I went to BYU. I met my wife there, Kristen, who's actually here, and yes. Kristen and I are very exciting people. We both have degrees in accounting, so we're not maybe the best to invite to a party. When after graduating from college, we started a pest control business, and we started it literally in our garage. So that's actually where people would come to work in the morning, is in our garage. And without any outside investors or any funding, outside investor funding, we've actually grown it into one of the largest pest control companies in the United States. And it's been a very difficult thing. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, and having said that, I'll now introduce Senator Mike Lee and take it from here, Senator.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you, and it's an honor to have so many people here with us tonight. I would imagine a number of you may be delegates. Raise your hand if you're a state delegate. This is terrific to have this many show up on a perfectly good Friday evening. That you'd be willing to spend it with us. So thanks for being here, and thanks to all of you joining us online. Jason, tell us, why do you want to be a senator?
That's a great question. So the truth is, I have not been involved politically. And by political, I've never run for political office. And honestly, until I met you, I had a pretty healthy disdain and distrust of politicians.
And afterwards, I'm sure also.
So no, but that's true. It's true. I mean, for those of you who are business owners, maybe that's something you can relate to. Do you ever have bad experiences with government regulators or trying to do what? I mean, my wife and I just put our head down. We've supplied thousands of jobs and mentored hundreds of people who become entrepreneurs. But every time I stuck my head up, I just ran into corrupt big government and corrupt regulators. And then times change. And you look at where the country was 10 years ago. You look at where it was 5 years ago, and you start drawing a curve to that. You say, where are we going to be in 5 years more, and in 8 years more? And then we had a traumatic experience in our life that our oldest daughter actually took her own life here in Provo, Jessica. And for our family, that was I call it a checkpoint restart moment, where you reevaluate who you are, what's important, and I just realized that the country needs more businessmen, kind of like Donald Trump, and people who don't have political attachment. And you inspired me. Honestly, you inspired me because I got to know you, and I said, hey, that's a man of integrity who's fighting the good fight. Our first conversations had nothing to do with politics, and it was very, very inspiring. And I feel that now more than ever, we need people who can toe the line in the Senate and pass and stop passing the Democrats' agenda.
We've taught Sunday school together. I've been his wingman as he's teaching. He does a really good job teaching, and I sit in the corner and say, yes, excellent point. It's good stuff. All right, so you described the circumstances that impelled you to get into the government, including the fact that our government, just when you think it couldn't get any worse, it somehow does. How did we get here? How did we get to that point?
Well, to me, first of all, I love the Constitution. I love it, and I know you do too. And the founding fathers had it right. So in the beginning, when the reason the Constitution, how about this? I don't like it when people say, "Is LeBron James a good basketball player?" Of course, he's a good basketball player. You can argue whether he's the greatest, but he's a very good basketball player. But people will still say that the Constitution doesn't work, or there's a better way, it's outdated. And that's not the problem at all. The problem is that we've not been about its sacred maintenance, as Washington said in his farewell address. So the way we got here is our forefathers suffered under tyranny of kings and queens for 1,000 years, and that tyranny was part of the divine preparation for the Constitution. They got here and realized they didn't like a lot of power at the top of the federal, the king and queen level. They realized that having authority at your local levels is what was important. And so they carefully, eventually, after they fought a war, did the Articles of Confederation. That's all divine preparation. And then they gave us the Constitution. And some of the things in there that were so, as Washington said at the end of his life, he encourages us in the sacred maintenance of the Constitution with wisdom and virtue. And to me, that sacred maintenance means maintaining federalism, or this concept that tyranny is to be avoided at all costs. So small federal powers, very enumerated, and broad state powers, anything that you can imagine. And then you have the horizontal axis of the separation of powers. And separation of powers, of course, are your branches of government. That you have the legislative branch, which is the House and Senate that makes the laws, executive branch that carries it out, and then the judicial branch that interprets. And once that Constitution was established, the greatest civilization in the history of the world sprung up. And it did it almost overnight. And it did it because the Constitution's not the American flag. It's not a symbol. It's literally the document that provides our liberty and our freedom on a day-by-day and a breath-by-breath basis. And it unlocks the unlimited human potential that we all have within us. And when that's unlocked and not encumbered by big government and by corrupt regulators, amazing things happen. It was proven. How we got here is, justices started regulating from the bench and rewriting the Constitution, like McCulloch v. Maryland, when they changed necessary and proper to the word necessary to mean useful and convenient. And it culminated, to me, what I call the great fracture, is the interpretation of the Commerce Clause that came in Wickard v. Filburn. When old farmer Filburn was just trying to grow wheat on his farm, and he decided
wheat, not weed. Yeah, important distinction there. Just wheat.
Yeah.
Totally kosher product.
So we're told. So wheat on his farm, and he decided he wanted to grow some extra wheat for his farm animals. And so the federal government took that broad interpretation that said, no, we actually can regulate whether you get to grow wheat on your farm, and using the Commerce Clause, meaning that that level of commerce that's just within your own household. And the federal government can regulate you and your farm in that way using the Commerce Clause. What can't it do? And from there sprang what I call the blasphemous maintenance of the Constitution, which is all the big government. And I call them all the three-letter agencies. And I say those are the ones that make me want to say four-letter words.
Okay. Well, all right, Jason, before I turn to my next question, just, pretend you're not listening to me for a minute. I have to provide brief commentary. I'm tearing up right now. That was really good. I absolutely loved every word he said. Would have taken me 4 times as long to explain that, and you would have all been asleep by the time I finished with it. That was fantastic.
Because you know 4 times more.
And it's almost not fair to any of the other candidates. The minute you bring up Wickard v. Filburn at a town hall, that says a lot. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, it kind of relates to my next question. One of the things that all of those developments that you've described have created is an environment in which the regulator is all powerful. Now, before I got into this job that I have now, I experienced this as a lawyer. You've experienced it in a more direct way as a businessman. Tell me how you've experienced regulatory overreach and how that has influenced you as a candidate, how it would influence you as a U.S. Senator.
I'll have to pause, so I don't come across as too heated with that question. But for those of you that are entrepreneurs, have you ever had the sense to go ask a regulator just to try, hey, I'm here to do the right thing? And if you if you did, how did that go? So when the first time my big main company's called Moxie Pest Control. When I first started it, I actually drove 4 hours to the main regulatory bureaucrat that was in charge of the regulations. And I had a question about a regulation, and I had to sign in. I said, do you do it this way or do you do it this way? And coincidentally, this regulator's last name was Walton, no relation. And he said, how do you think you should do it? I said, I think you do it like this. And he said, that's incorrect. You do it this way. So I did what he said. And 3 weeks later, I think I was inspected, and then I got a large fine from the same person for doing what he said. So I drove back down, and I said, what's with this? I drove down and asked just this question. And he said, oh, yeah, well, it's not really my job for whether you do things right or wrong. I thought, oh, that's odd. I thought that was your exact job. But then that's where I came to realize that the regulators see their jobs as to actually get in the way of business. For those of you who are entrepreneurs, you'll know that as the government gets bigger and bigger and bigger, I don't think there's any regulatory agency that exists that is not corrupt and that is not bloated and that doesn't cost 5 to 10 times more than it should. And they're not helping business people. They're not stimulating the economy. They're holding people back and creating reasons to exist. And it's kind of disgusts me. But I was in Emery County, and I was talking to a rancher, a woman named, I believe, Joelle, if you're watching. Her husband passed away, I think, 10 years ago. If I have that wrong, I apologize. And she inherited the ranching operation. It's a small ranching operation. She says, the amount of regulations that I have to deal with, she says, I can't do it. You have to hire full-time people to even know what the regulations are and then how to properly handle them, and I can't. And that's
deal with the grazing permits and things like that.
All of it, yes, all of it, because for those of you who are business people, how many times has someone come in, some new entity that you didn't even know existed that's a regulator, and then comes up with a rule that you'd never heard of and then holds you accountable for it, and it's another way of taxing. Senator, I've had people walk into my branch, regulators, to say, the funding for our regulators is lower, so I have to leave with X $1,000. That's it, hello. And so it just isn't right. And this is the type of thing that is choking our economy. It chokes business. It chokes the American people. It's the opposite of unlocking the unlimited potential, and it's just shackles people, and it just needs to end.
Okay, let me follow up briefly on that. So as an employer, as somebody who was employed many thousands of people, including a lot of young people, what does that do to your ability to hire and to provide them with jobs? I would imagine that the regulatory compliance costs, the amount of money that you have to spend on lawyers and just the cost of compliance generally, it comes right out of not only your bottom line, but even before that, it comes right out of your payroll. You can't hire as many people.
You can't hire as many people, and even the cost of the regulators can make you go out of business. And it does oftentimes prevent people from even starting to go out of business. It's too intimidating to begin with. But yeah, it is expensive. It is expensive, and it's a tax that we don't talk about. We don't say it the right way. It's a tax. How about this? Some of you may have heard that there was a COVID virus not so long ago, and we were told that we had to have masks and get injections, and the government told us a lot of things that was hurtful and not true. But one of the things they did is they paid people more to not work than to work. We made at least 1,000 job offers, and we couldn't get people to take the job because we were competing against our own federal government to pay them to do nothing. It was unbelievably hard to stay in business during that period.
And in that respect, the big government enterprises are very often supposed to be looking out for the little guy, for the new up-and-comer. Has that been your experience?
No, they're there to punish you. And I wonder what the failure rate would actually be. They say most small businesses, 80 to 85%, I think, fail in the first 5 years. If you just lifted the regulations and eased up on the taxes, I'll bet that would significantly decrease, and you'd see the economy just boom. I know for us, even those who are successful, we'd be able to scale at a much larger level if it wasn't for the government literally being my chief competitor to not be able to be productive.
And what happens when you have more competition? It tends to bring up quality and bring down prices. And with a big government, it tends to be the opposite. Consolidation is the norm, less competition, quality goes down, prices go up. And we've got to stop that.
Well said. I think it's just I would say that it feels like the federal government has contempt for the American dream.
Right. Right.
Absolute contempt for the American dream. And I hope to join you and do something about that.
All right. As the owner and CEO of Moxie, as a businessman, you make budgeting decisions. You decide how much you're going to spend and where you're going to spend it. Would it be shocking to you to learn that it's not always how it works in Washington?
No. That's one of the reasons I'm here. Yeah.
And in fact, in Washington, you very often end up with a circumstance where only a small handful of people, there are 435 people in the House and 100 in the Senate. And if the law firm of Schumer, McConnell, Johnson, and Jeffries writes a bill in secret, 1,300 pages long, spending well over $1 trillion, and they give it to you with only a day or two to spend, it leaves you with fewer options. Just the same, when that comes up at the same time when our country is undergoing a very significant threat to its national security, a wholesale invasion taking place across our southern border. And a lot of people, and into Utah, we're not a border state, but we border a couple of border states. And because we technically border, New Mexico down there in that corner. That has a real impact on us. Now, a lot of people in that moment will say, well, the president's a Democrat and the Senate is under the control of the Democratic Party, so there's nothing you can do. Tell me what you think about that and what could be done with spending bills that could help us address immigration.
Well, that's a good question. It's multi-layered. But the first thing I want to just say is we need to balance the budget. So, we have to balance the budget. And as a business person, it's not just that those of you who own businesses, but how about for those of you that just manage your own households? So how does it work if you manage your own household running a large deficit every year and amounting the debt? What happens to your household? Your home gets taken away. Your car gets repossessed. You don't have the ability to go print more money, do you? So it's the same with a business. So, and I know this isn't possible, but I'm just saying it's one of the reasons you want to elect business people. I know it's not possible, but I'm telling you, this country would be drastically different if you got at least 30, 40 more people in the Senate who had run businesses and that had run a business for 5 years and been a payroll for 5 years. It would change the country. It would change the country. Your question was can I turn it to the omnibus bills that we just had coming out? Yeah, is that okay? Well, the omnibus bill, and you talked about Senate leadership. Near as I can tell, the Senate leadership has done a great job, a really good job of getting things done. And by getting things done, I mean getting the Democrats' agenda done and literally passing the Democrat agenda.
Freakishly accurate. Absolutely true.
So
he's even being delicate in putting that, but that is literally true.
Yeah, it is absolutely true. But what did we get in the last omnibus bill? I mean, what did the Republicans have the opportunity to negotiate? They have the Democrats really seriously wanting some things. And what did we ask for? Did we get any more security at our border?
Nope.
I didn't think so. Did we give $500 million to Jordan for their border? I think we did. Yeah. How does that make you feel that we're securing the borders of other countries before we'll secure the borders of our own? Is that absurd? I shouldn't ask that. They're booing me, but I mean, but right, it's not. It just isn't right. It's just not right. But there's things that we could have asked for in that bill that would have helped us secure our own border and given us some. From your perspective, what happened? What's the breakdown? So I know we don't have the Senate, but we control the House, and we have enough senators to filibuster to get some things done in the Senate. So, what is going on, Senator Lee?
Yeah, look, if Republicans in either the House or the Senate, even though we don't control the Senate, they can't pass most legislation, including spending legislation, without some Republicans joining them. And the rule in the Senate for most legislation, you can't pass it without bringing debate to a close. Bringing debate to a close requires 60 votes. Democrats have only 51 votes. So that means they've got to take some from us. Stated differently, any group of 41 senators can stop just about any bill from happening. So if 41 Republican senators, not even our whole complement of 49, it said, no, we're not going to move this spending bill unless you incorporate H.R. 2 or the main operative provisions of H.R. 2, which would have stripped President Biden of a lot of the authorities that he's abusing right now to facilitate, anywhere from 10 to 13 or 14 million illegal immigrants that have come in just since January 20th, 2021. Could have made a big difference. Even if we hadn't gone that far, what if we had been more modest about it? We could have at least gotten, Bill Hagerty's amendment passed. Senator Hagerty from Tennessee introduced something that said, let's not spend money anymore flying illegal immigrants to the destination of their choice within the United States. Or my amendment that I introduced, based on my bill called the Valid Act, that would end the use of the CBP One app, where you just enter your name. I'm Bob from Jamaica or El Salvador or wherever I'm from. You don't have to produce any identification. That becomes your identification. You can use that as if it were a passport to enter the country and then to board a plane to fly inside the interior of the country. We can't do that. If you or I tried to do that at the airport, we wouldn't make it past TSA ever. So if every Republican, or even most Republicans in either the House or the Senate, had demanded that, as long as we've got something the administration wants passed and the Democrats want passed, we can use that as leverage to pass it. And we didn't do that, and it's to our everlasting shame. But have no fear, because we spent $2.5 million on outdoor recreational activities in Franklin, New Hampshire, and $3.5 million on parade float construction somewhere in Michigan. And they tried to devote $1 million to fund a BDSM sex club in Philadelphia. They got called out on that one, and they ended up pulling it out. But they wouldn't pull out any of the other awful spending provisions.
If I remember right, with that club that you talked about, I think someone made a comment that, that senator was just joking, and that senator then corrected himself and said, no, actually, I wasn't joking. We want that.
You can't make this up. So my colleague, Senator John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, he had been the one who issued a statement as soon as it started getting attention. Oh, this wasn't supposed to be in there. We didn't know what this was. We're going to try to get this taken out. The next day, somebody asked Senator Fetterman, and he said, no, I totally want it in there. I did request it. I knew what it was. That needs to be funded. He was mad that his staff had already taken a knee on that one.
It's taken earmarks to a new level. This is what it feels like to me. And you can tell me if you agree or disagree, but it feels to me that in today's America, with that omnibus bills like that you have illegal immigrants who are first-class citizens, you have regular citizens who are second-class citizens, and you have our veterans that we don't take care of who are making third-class citizens. And I think it's shameful.
That's awesome.
It's shameful. It needs to change. If you can't judge us, you can judge a society by how well they take care of their veterans and the people who continue to provide that blanket of security. And I've been in this campaign. It's been very bothersome to me as I've gone and talked to the veterans and found out how hard it is for them to get care and how terrible that care is. And then I look at the great care that we're giving the illegal immigrants.
And if you listen to the explanations provided by a lot of members of the Congress, House and Senate, especially Republicans, they usually acknowledge, this is a terrible bill. It was a terrible process. They gave it to us on a Thursday, and we voted on it on Friday. Didn't give us adequate time to debate and discuss it and amend it, but I voted for it anyway. And they'll give some sort of broad explanation as to why they did. Very often that's code for, I got some juicy earmarks in there. So tell me where you stand on earmarks. I think I've got a clue based on what you said a moment ago, but I just want to make sure.
I think earmarks are an abomination. I think that we as Republicans need to be less hypocritical about it. So even in this race, people ask me that question, and I say I don't like federal earmarks. I don't understand. They're not constitutional. I think they violate the Constitution because it's not for everyone. And people say, I'm glad to hear that. We need a good conservative. And I'll say, are you in my camp? And sometimes they'll say, no, and they'll name somebody else, and they'll say, he's been taking good care of us, and then they list the earmarks. And I think that the problem is that happens all over the country. That's not a target at someone in the race. It's a target at a systemic problem in America. It's because everybody wants everyone else's candidate not to pass earmarks, but they want their own candidate to pass earmarks, and they keep rewarding their own candidates for passing earmarks. That's why I say this is a revolution and a restoration of values that we're having in America, right? To go back to solid constitutional, conservative constitutional governance and to fiscal responsibility. And fiscal responsibility means that we all have to be grown-ups and say, not only is it unconstitutional, but we have to demand fiscal responsibility from our elected representatives. And if not, we have to have the strength to send them home. You're not going to do it, you got to go home. I mean, not only that, by the way, why do your congressmen have the right to trade stocks of companies that appear before their committee? Wow, that's not, it's just not right. I mean, no matter who you are or what you're doing, you got to go home if you're doing that type of stuff. And when you talked about that bill, if you don't mind me deviating a little bit, about getting bills at 11 o'clock, I'm just going to be, I've never told you this before, can I be honest with you? The first couple times I'd heard you talking about how they gave you bills at 11 o'clock at night.
You thought I was exaggerating.
I thought it was political talk. Yeah, I did. I thought it was political talk. Like, he really knows.
No, I don't blame you.
He knows what's in the bill. Come on. And I was with you once when one of those bills came in late at night, and I saw your genuine reaction to it, which wasn't pleasant. And I believe you were up till 1 or 2 in the morning reading it. And since I know that that's true, that I just want to say that, like, the American people need to understand, that people in Utah need to understand, that's a true thing. And if that's not, we complain about tyranny. But when you have two people sitting at the top of the Senate, the law firm, as you call the law firm of Schumer McConnell, and they are giving bills to your elected representatives at 11 o'clock at night and expecting a vote the next day, that's a tyranny that we should be marching on Washington for. That's unconscionable. It is in direct opposition to constitutional governance, and it's an absolute fracture of the separation of powers, with the intention of it. It is wicked. It's wicked. And if I believe that the Constitution was divinely inspired, and I do, and that George Washington encouraged us in the sacred maintenance, that's an example of what I say is the blasphemous maintenance of the Constitution. And that's the kind of thing we need to stand up for. And as a people, I'm not talking just senators. The American people need to have a restoration of values where we say, we will not tolerate that. And the one thing that I'm learning so far that people in Washington understand is the power of their own elected representatives, their own voting bloc, to vote them out of office. And they want you to forget that. They want you to think that you're powerless, your voice doesn't matter, that there's nothing that you can do. There's nothing one senator can do. There's nothing an official can do. And the exact opposite is true. You have all the power. The vertical powers of federalism have failed. They're cracked. The horizontal axis of the separation of powers, it's cracked. The last great check that we have on the federal government is we the people. It's you. It's your vote. And we need to come to a shared value system to recognize there's certain things and behaviors and values that no matter how much we like the person, they need to be voted in or out of Congress based on their values.
Okay, brief commercial break. I want to comment on another thing that he said. Just there was a subtle but very important point that he made there that doesn't get made nearly as often as it should be. He made the point that not only are there public policy and practical reasons why earmarks are bad, because they convince otherwise perhaps decent lawmakers to vote for a really bad bill and for corrupt reasons. But he also said that independently of that, more often than not, this stuff falls outside of what Congress is supposed to be doing anyway. Most of them don't fall within one of the enumerated powers. They shouldn't be doing it for that reason. And to the extent that it amounts to a private benefit that we're conferring, that was exactly what the founders were trying to prohibit with the general welfare limitation in the spending clause in Article 1, Section 8. So kudos to you for pointing out that nuance. Thank you for saying that. Okay, the next thing I wanted to ask you about was FISA 702. Tell me what you think. You know, Congress is going to be asked in the next few days to reauthorize that because FISA Section 702 is about to expire. I believe it's on April 19th. Tell me what your take is on that.
It's fascist. That's what my take on it is. The FISA 702, if they pass that, if they vote incorrectly on it, they're saying that your government can collect information and spy on you without a warrant. Does that sound like the United States of America to you? Is it just me, or does that seem like it's a violation of your Fourth Amendment rights? Feels like it to me. So what do I think about it? That's the kind of thing, Senator Lee, that it's shocking to me that we have that discussion and that it's actually going to vote. It's It's part of the reason why these elections coming are so important, that we have good conservative people who value conservative constitutional governance, textualists, because it's really clear how unconstitutional that is. And the reasonings that I read about make me nervous, because the reasons that I see the members of the House and the Senate givings for wanting to allow that fascist spying on your own citizens without a warrant. If we haven't learned anything in the last 4 to 8 years, do you feel like you can trust the FBI and the CIA and the three-letter agencies? So, I mean, I hear them saying things like, oh, it's okay, we won't do anything wrong. Oh, well, you say so. Why would we not trust the NSA?
Exactly. No, that's a great point. And by the way, coincidentally or not coincidentally, the last time FISA 702 came up for reauthorization, I believe it was at the end of 2018. And guess how they got it passed? Without a warrant requirement. They put it in a spending bill at the very end of the year, written by the law firm, by the aforementioned firm, the Schumer and McConnell, and they left us no choice but to do it. So we were able to get it split away from the spending bill this time. That's what makes it that much more important.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, well, doing our best. You know, FISA 702 is fine as it applies to operating terrorists and agents of foreign powers outside the United States. But when you're here in the United States, especially as a U.S. citizen, you deserve better. We are going to get to questions in a few minutes, but this is the part of the program where I get to grill them, and then we'll make sure we get to questions there in a moment.
That's a great point. So we don't have a problem with like doing what you do to people in foreign countries. The issue with FISA 702 is they're asking for permission to spy on U.S. citizens without a warrant.
Right. Once they've incidentally collected, let's suppose that I am an agent of a foreign power and I'm in Yemen or something like that. And I call you and, hey, Jason, it's Mike from Yemen, your old friend.
Hey, Mike.
And then we have conversations back and forth. Because of conversations like that, they may incidentally collect some of his communications over the phone, whether it's by voice, text, email, or otherwise. They can record that and store that in the database. Where they run into trouble is if they go searching. Show me all the communications from Jason Walton. They've got those recordings. That, at that point, becomes a warrantless search of and directed at a U.S. citizen. And last I checked, we settled that issue in 1791 with the Fourth Amendment. So that's why it's important, and glad to hear that we agree on that issue very strongly. All right, let's talk next about public lands. You lived this. You grew up in Monticello. In Grand County. Grand County is
San Juan.
Oh no, that's right. Monticello. Yeah. That is in San Juan County. Sorry, that's a big faux pas on my part. In my defense, it's near Grand County.
Yes, sir.
Which is also a large public land state. San Juan County is perhaps the most densely federal public land state in our entire state. 67% of the land in our state is federal. In San Juan County, it's I believe 93% federal land. I learned this years ago when I represented San Juan County in some litigation. And as a result of that, it causes all kinds of problems. Tell me just your take generally on why the federal government owns that much federal land and how it manages that land.
I think the reason they own it is because there's a lot of East Coast elitists. And so if you look at basically east of Colorado, you're going to find that all those states, the federal government owns somewhere between 1% and 15% max, and most of it a lot less than 15% of the land. So states like, I think I'm right on these, like Texas, it's a big state, Kansas. Now let's go East Coast, New York, Maine. The federal government owns less than 2% of those states. Does it seem right that the federal government should own 67% of your state? I know it doesn't feel right for me and mine from San Juan County that they own 93% of San Juan County. That's 7% that's not owned by the federal government. It's not even the state of Utah. And so I think how we got here was that East Coast elitists said, hey, it's great to have our land, and we would like to control your land because you're not capable of being good stewards of your land. That's what it feels like to me. And I'm not. So what why what was the second half of the question? Sorry.
Yeah, what does that do to us as a state, and how would you approach federal public land as a senator?
Yeah. So what it does to us as a state is we don't have.
I'm still kicking myself for the Grand. I was thinking San Juan County, said Grand. Terribly sorry to my friends in San Juan.
Your friends in San Juan feel your love. I was just there last week, and they're very appreciative of everything you've done for them. But what it does is it hurts us in a lot of ways. So what happens to your housing prices when there's no more land to build houses on? How's that work for you? What do you think happens with that? So it affects us for our schools and our tax base. So then we don't have the tax base to support our schools, which was kind of the intention of getting the lands back from the federal government in the first place. And so what do I think are good? So basically we're being robbed by our own federal government. It's Big Brother once again sticking in. Now, you actually have the best ideas of anyone in the United States on this one. And it's I love your Housing Act and is it the More PILF Act? Mm-hmm. PILF, P-I-L-F? PILT, P-I-L-T, for taxes. Yeah, yeah. So, but the Houses Act, the way I understand it, is that you're just freeing up. You're saying, hey, well, how about we just free up a little bit more federal land around our cities and our communities that there's no reason the federal government should own. And it's not to go to elitists or big business people. You have provisions in there that they're just houses for lower middle income. And it's not for sprawling estates, and it's not for large corporate complexes, but it's just to help the people of Utah to have more affordable housing. I talked to the Utah County Commissioner about this recently, and she actually broke out a map and was showing me federal land right around southern Utah Lake and just on the other side of it, and talked about how opening that up, how good it would be, not just for Utah County, but for all the people of Utah. And then when it comes to your More PILT Act, all you're asking there is, if you know what PILT is, it's money you get paid for federal lands, and Senator Lee is saying, hey, since that money was never really transferred back to the state of Utah like it should have, why don't we have the Secretary of Interior go evaluate that land and see what the price of the land's actually worth, and maybe double or triple the PILT payments. And if that happens correctly, I don't think that we really want the federal government to pay us more in PILT. We just want them to say, how about we just give you the land?
We would be not unhappy with that outcome should they choose to do that.
Yeah.
Who else gets to just own that much land? If any landowner, corporate entity, or a nonprofit, or even an individual owned that much land or anything close to it, more than 5 or 10% of the land in the state, they could dominate that state's economy. They could squelch competition. It could adversely affect economic growth, jobs, all sorts of opportunities. But when it's not just 5 or 10%, but 67%, and that entity is a sovereign government that declares itself exempt from taxation and then says, oh, I'm going to pay you this payment in lieu of taxes for what we feel like paying rather than the property tax equivalent. No, who gets to do that? Like, nobody should be able to do that. That really hurts our state's economy. It comes right out of what we're able to put into our state's public education system, into search and rescue, fire, police, and so forth.
And that's without getting into, yeah. That's without even getting into the land where we have a lot of natural resources, like in the Uinta Basin, where there's a lot of oil and shale and we're not talking about going and drilling under the arches of the national parks. We're just talking about getting some natural resources in a very responsible way. And there's places all over Utah where we can do that. But the federal government, as Big Brother, says, no, you can't. You can't do that. And we're not even going to give you permits to do it. And then when you do get the permits, then you have these leftist organizations filing a lawsuit to hold it up in court forever, like was happening with that train up there right now.
Right. It's one of the reasons why we've got to be especially careful with some of the legislation that is passed. We've had some legislation enacted over time, including in the last few years, that really was a raw deal for Utah. They'll come and offer us, pittance. We're going to open up a few acres for recreation. And in exchange, you're going to give us 700,000 acres of wilderness.
Sounds like the Dingle Act.
It does.
Yeah.
How would you have voted on the Dingle Act?
I would have voted against the Dingle Act because what it did, it was a bad vote. It was a really bad vote. So once you start going and trusting the federal government and making these deals, especially with what's the department that you really can't trust?
Well, which one can you trust?
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, it's all of them. But yeah, I would have voted against that for sure. I mean, what they did is they said, hey, we're going to have a balanced way to let you open up some land, and they gave 17,000 acres that you can't touch, and it was like 200,000 acres that you can. And then I think they went in with all these other rules that interfered even with those 200,000 acres, and they just will keep taking away, and it's a bad deal.
Indeed. One of the ways that people get there is that you get Turns out you don't get a lot of praise for standing up to legislation like that. You do get praise for backing it, and it's what I call the get stuff done impulse. How many in here have raised a teenager at some point in their life? With teenagers, rules are important. That's certainly what we learned with our teenagers. We've got my wife, Sharon, here. Wave to everyone. Sharon. Sharon's a really good mom to little kids and teenage kids, and one of our kids just had a baby today. Her name is Daisy. She's our first granddaughter. Daisy's dad, our son James, when he was a teenager, he, like his siblings, they had rules, expectations. When James went out on a date, he knew what our expectations and our rules were about, what he was going to do on the date, how he would behave himself, what time he'd be home. Can you imagine if you said to your teenagers, they said, I'm going on a date. Great, get stuff done with no rules in place. Now, you think at first that it's an absurd comparison, but I'm actually understating the nature of it. As bad as that would be to do with teenagers, I can make a case it's much, much worse to do that with adult lawmakers, especially wielding federal power. So Jason, what would you do to resist the impulse, the siren call of get stuff done?
Redefine it. So I think one of the main ways you get stuff done is stopping bad legislation. Stop bad spending bills. That's getting stuff done. Saving the country from this addiction to spending that's now 35 trillion in debt. So if I had to cast the vote with some of these bills and it was the vote to shut down the government, that's the courageous vote. And that may not make me popular, and it may not be something that our liberal media, even here in Utah, will compliment me for, and it may not be the thing that maybe you would even vote me out of office for it. But by heaven, we're going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And if we keep spending like crazy, then how is that going to go, whether it's a household or a business or the United States of America? That's one of the primary reasons I'm running. And I would say shutting down the government to make it start changing its spending policies to be a little bit more reasonable and something that can actually work in the long run. That's getting stuff done.
But Jason, you're going to be called an obstructionist if you take that approach.
Can you make a badge that I can wear? So, hey, it's a patriotic thing. I said at the beginning, I'm running as a patriot to try to literally save the country. I think that the Constitution's in rough shape because we are so blasphemously maintaining it. I think that our addiction to spending it's the thing that made me get up off the couch. I said, if it's not me, then who? And we've had it here, and I mean no disrespect, but I've had it be, maybe some of you in Utah, you thought you were electing one thing. You got something else. And I'm telling you, the electorate, the
Has that happened in Utah?
Well, hey, so what I'm trying to say is like this: the House of Representatives, they're accountable to you every 2 years, but the Senate, it's every 6. You better be careful with us. You better be really careful and make sure that foundation is solid and it's what it needs to be.
Okay, so with that in mind, what can you tell us about why you won't do that? How do we know whether you will do, once you're in office, what you've said you would do tonight? Because sometimes people will get elected to office and say some of the same things. They're not quoting Wickard v. Filburn, mind you, but some of them will say a lot of other similar things. How do we know that you'll do what you're saying tonight that you'll do?
Well, that's a great question. I guess in essence, you really don't know what someone's going to do before you elect them. So that's why you're trying to choose. Oh, I do. I know exactly what I'm going to do. So like, here's the reasons why you should know. You should listen to what I'm saying when I'm campaigning. So I don't talk about anything without relating it back to the Constitution because it's my ideological core. And it's been my thank you. Yeah, it's been my experience. It's been my experience that what people talk about the most when they're campaigning follows them into the cycle. Also, I came out aggressively on the radio and on TV against Mitch McConnell. That's a pretty dangerous thing to do. I didn't see anyone else in this race doing that. And if you can't change, if you're not going to go after the establishment when you're running, what makes you think you're going to go after the establishment when you get in office? So if you're afraid, you're afraid. So if I was willing to take him on right now, which I have been in a way that no one else has, then what makes you think all of a sudden I'm going to stop that when I get into the Senate? It's actually harder to do that now. And the other reason is, I want you to hear this part and really hear this. With the problems that we have right now, I promise you the solution is not another politician. And I think we all know that. I think that if I've been going and doing town halls and meeting with the good people of Utah, that I can feel that the same backlash that came from the 60s and 70s, 1960s, 1970s, there was a conservative backlash in the 80s. It's happening now again. There's an awakening of patriots who are rising up, and you're electing business people who have no hooks in us, people who are self-made and are going to Washington for patriotic reasons to go do what many of the others, to go join you and the courageous few, and go do what others won't do. They just won't or can't do it. And I have no sense of self-preservation whatsoever, none. And if it happens to be that I'm the one who's a sacrificial lamb, like I said, that's a badge of honor. I will wear that, and that'll be something that my children and grandchildren can look to and be proud of. That's just the way I see it. And at the end of the day, you, the voters, the people of Utah, you'll get to choose. If you'll have me, I'd love it to be your next U.S. Senator from the state of Utah. And if not, then you have to live with whoever you vote in.
I think it's time for the
so
Q&A.
yeah, I think so too. So let's just open up for questions. And Senator Lee can choose.
Oh,
You want me to?
No, actually, this is maybe that's better. At first I wasn't trusting myself. I thought maybe you'd be mad at me if I picked the wrong person, but this will be good. I saw this hand up here in the back, and then we'll go to you because you had your hand.
You can throw those Nerf cushions. I think we probably have another one somewhere.
Executive orders. What's your feeling about executive orders?
Gosh, this is what I really want to hear Senator Lee's answer. I'm going to take a crack at it first, but I really want to hear the constitutionalist answer. That's something that's really seems to grow over time by all the presidents that come into power. They seem to expand it and expand it, and it seems to be not consistent with what was my understanding of the Constitution. But right now, the main executive order that I want to talk about is I could not stand it in the State of the Union of hearing Joe Biden yelling at the Republicans. And when the Democrats started chanting and pointing and ranting at the Republicans, get it done, referring to the border, I had to stand up and go for a walk because that is so hypocritically offensive. That the one president, the presidential order that President Trump had put in place, which was to implement to not have a catch and release policy and to implement the stay in Mexico policy, that's actually a presidential order that we need. And the fact that the Democrats are playing political games, Joe Biden, all he needs to do is with a pen right now go enact that same presidential order. End catch and release and implement a stay in Mexico policy. Yep, 98 executive orders, but he can't manage to do that one. Bunch of orders that have nothing to do with the Constitution. And the few things that the Constitution actually specifically enumerates, he can't even manage to do those. So, and I find it disgusting, by the way. Senator Lee, it looks to me like the Democrats and the cartels are business partners. And I mean that. And if they're not, they couldn't have designed it any better. Because the cartels make way more money from the amount of human trafficking that's increased because that executive order was eliminated. And because I was at the border. And I'm telling you, the cartels know where all the Border Patrol agents are. They line people up at the border and so that the Border Patrol agents will take them. I was at the Tucson sector. They drive them 2 hours to Tucson. Now the border's wide open. And so the Border Patrol agents have to stay there to process them. And while they're being processed, who do you think's coming across the border? That's when all your fentanyl, your meth, your heroin's coming in. And the Border Patrol agents were showing us how that's done. It's also, I'm assuming, when your undesirables come in, and I mean the people who are on the terror watch list. It is talk about being asleep at the wheel. If you're going to pass 98 executive orders, then for the love of Almighty, please do the one that protects our citizens and our communities. But the reason, what do the Democrats get from it? Well, Schumer, if I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Senator, but he introduces a bill that says at the session to implement catch and release, which is already done. The bill says give every illegal immigrant an ID card and give every illegal immigrant the right to vote. Yeah, does that feel right to you? We have literally roughly 3.3 illegal immigrants coming into this country per year since Joe Biden's been the president. That is almost equivalent to the entire population of the state of Utah in illegal immigrants per year. If that policy goes into place, you have a one-party state, and a failed state, I might add. And so what do the Democrats get? They're buying votes with your security. It's wrong.
Okay, I think you're next, and then we'll go back here. Yes, ma'am.
Just on earmarks, do you have a rough idea how much is in those earmark bills?
Yeah, in the last bill, I think in one of the bills we had
12
12 billion, and the other one it's like 16 billion. We had two spending bills back to back, separated by about 2 weeks. It's that's an enormous sum of money.
Yeah. When you hear the number, it's more impressive.
Right. The number itself is more impressive than the ratio, but they always want to talk about the ratio.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think of the ratio argument.
I think that's snake oil talk. I hate that type of double talk. Oh, but it's only this ratio or that. It's more than my entire city pays in taxes since it was enacted in Monticello. All the residents since my great-great-grandfather went there in the around 1890, roughly. All of their tax base for all of their lives and all their posterity till now. That's what you're talking about. Let's just call it what it is. And it's the same thing of everybody's favorite earmark. I mean, like, everyone could justify spending. Everyone wants to justify spending, and nobody wants to justify saving. And so it's just time to stand up to that. It drives me crazy. That's the answer. No to earmarks, no to earmarks, no to earmarks.
Amen. Okay. Yes, sir. And then we'll go back here. Yeah.
As you described the border, don't you remember way back when they were splitting families that came across the border, and everybody was outraged, even though that was a Clinton policy. Right now, we have the situation that you just described. In addition, my understanding is, 60% of women are sexually assaulted coming across the border?
The low-end estimates are 30%, high-end like 65%.
The cartels are making all this money. Why isn't there just total outrage across the whole United States where that shouldn't go another day where the cartel running that? Why is it that we're sitting here and we're talking about it, but it just goes on?
You're the host. Do you want me to talk this, or do you want to?
I like his shirt, so I think he was. I'm happy. Why don't you take a go at this first? Look at that.
I love that.
I like Mike. Is what it
That's a good
says.
shirt.
Yeah. So I think he's talking to you.
Excellent. So there are a number of us who do talk about it and are outraged. When we do, it's like the tree that falls in the forest with no one there to hear it, because the media won't report on it. I can't even count the number of times when I've given speeches on the Senate floor or done media interviews or otherwise spoken about that issue, about that range of statistics, even if it's at the low end in the 30s. It's a huge, huge number, huge percentage of all the women and girls that come up who are sexually exploited. And really, I think that ends up being kind of a euphemism for the fact that they're being sex trafficked. I've heard some appalling stories recently about how, they tend to be charged anywhere from $4,000 or $5,000 at the low end to $50,000 or $60,000 at the high end, depending on what country they're coming from, and what kind of risk factors they have, as to how much they have to pay the cartels to be smuggled. Now, even if it's at the low end, these are not people with huge sums of money to spare. They're coming from very poor countries, very humble circumstances. So where do they get that money? They scrounge together as much as they can from whatever savings they might have accumulated, whatever they can sell, and then they're left with working it off. And guess how a lot of them are asked to work it off? It's through that. And some of them, I'm told, are, I heard one of my colleagues say recently that it often takes a woman or a young woman 6, 7, 8 years to work off what she has to pay to come up here. This is appalling, and yet the media refuses to report on it. Now, look, this may shock you, but the media in Utah are not conservative. It's not just that they're not conservative. They will not report things. There are a couple of very shining examples that I can point to, including a guy I know who may be here who's a member of the press, but he's a rare exception. Our media often leans to the left of the media that you see in Washington, D.C., because at least in Washington, D.C., you have a few outlets that will tell the full story. Doesn't necessarily mean they're conservative. It just means they're willing to tell the full story. So that's what's happening. And I love the way Jason put it a few minutes ago, where if I didn't know better, and I'm not sure that I do know better, I'd wonder what's going on there. This is exactly how you would arrange things if you wanted the cartels to make tens of billions of dollars a year trafficking humans, and with those humans, exploiting those humans, and simultaneously trafficking in enough fentanyl to kill millions of Americans, and that have killed 100,000 plus Americans each year for the last 3 years in a row. This is tragic, but it doesn't get reported on, and that's part of the problem. That's why we need brave voices in the Senate who are willing to call it out. They can't ignore, when it gets to the point where we have, 30, 40 of us, but we're all speaking on the same page, they can't ignore it anymore.
Well,
Yeah, so before you go on, a little bit of a cap on that that's particularly offensive is if this last omnibus bill, since we talked about it earlier, I believe it had provisions for border spending. Do you know what it was for? For more beds for illegal immigrants. We have our veterans homeless right here on the streets of our own county, right here in the streets outside this building. And we're getting more beds. You sell it as if, hey, we're implementing border security, but you're not. You're implementing beds for more illegal immigrants when you won't take care of your veterans. It's not right.
thank you.
Okay, we're going to go
Biden
to Red.
administration needs to be held accountable for those human.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree completely.
Yes, sir.
I agree completely. And 72 to 96 hours from now, we're going to receive articles of impeachment from the House of Representatives, and I'm going to fight my darndest to stop them from tabling that motion. They're not eligible to do it, and so we're going to bring a lot of this to light. And even if they try to table it, we're going to make it hard. All right. Red shirt in the back is next, and then we'll go to white shirt in the front.
Yeah,
And then
you said that we're $34 trillion in debt. I dispute that, saying we're over $100 trillion in debt because we have unfunded liabilities, meaning pension plans, health plans, and that for all the federal employees that are making. The CBO and political, which come from the federal government, states that federal employees make 52% higher for federal employees than the private sector employees. We also talk about, and it's always a big thing about Social Security, how it's entitlement and these entitlements. But we never hear congressmen or senators or others say how their pension plans are, quote, entitlements. It's always the Social Security people receiving, those are entitlements. Another thing here is we borrowed $2.9 trillion from Social Security that has never been paid back by the politicians. Yet they continue to say Social Security is going to be insolvent. The word salad is by NASDAQ and all the economists say, well, that's okay because we're paying interest on that $2.9 trillion that they borrowed, right? Well, if I borrow $100 from you and 20 years down the road, I say, well, I'm going to give you, 10% interest on that $100, but you have no money. Can you spend that $100? Even though I'm going to pay you interest 20 years down the road on it. You can't do that. So what is the option of getting this under control, stopping federal pension plans from being very bloated? And if you say, I'm willing to shut the government down, who still gets a paycheck, Senator? You do. Federal employees don't. The military will. But Congress and senators will get their paycheck. And when they pass the budget, do the federal employees get their payback or their paychecks paid back whenever it went shut down? You bet. How do we stop that? That isn't good for the private sector. I can't do that as a business owner. I can't support that.
So first off, one of the things that you mentioned there that I'm glad you brought up was about, to me, it looks like kiting, meaning that, like, I think to me, it's almost criminal that you would fund a pension plan and then not leave it as a funded pension plan, that you would take any money out of it and borrow it. So why that happens, that's the first thing that to me is unconscionable. That has to end. Next, this isn't a popular thing to say, but like, when you start talking about all those other entitlement programs, we have to actually come up with, I'm going to just do a little bit of real talk here. We need to, the accounting degree in me, the balancing budget. I don't see where all those entitlement programs are even constitutional, really. So, but does that mean you get rid of them? Of course you can't do that. That leaves too many people high and dry. But you've got to put together an actual plan, a real plan of how you're going to privatize them over time. And that's something I look forward to talking about. We need people like you to come in who've clearly looked into it and frustrated and talk about that. And I really mean that, because I think you're right. When it comes to shutting down the government and the pension plans, I'm too green to even know that. I'm sitting here going, we get pension plans? so, and I know that's probably not funny to you, but I'm totally unaware. So, but it's not just, let me show you a story. I was in Texas one time, and I took someone in to take a test. And while it was to get a pest control license, and I had to wait for like 6 hours. And I watched the person working the desk do nothing. I mean, nothing for 6 hours. And so I went and I asked her, how long have you worked here? She said, about 2 months. I said, what do you think of the job? Best job I've ever had. This is really what she said. I said, why is that? She goes, I don't have to do anything here because it's a government job. And what do you like the most about it? She said, my benefits are incredibly good. They're way better than what I had in the private sector. And the other thing I like about it is there's no accountability. So no one's always getting on me saying, how come this isn't done? And why isn't it done right? My point is that you're hitting the nail right on the head, that what I said earlier, and that federal bureaucracies are inherently corrupt and they're inherently bloated, and that what they do a really good job of is just taking care of themselves. And that's why you're talking to maybe the most conservative member of the Senate who is wanting to fight that, and then someone like me that wants to join him in that fight. And I know from just personal conversations, those are things that we really want to go take on. They're difficult problems. They're not easy. But we really do want to take them on because we see those things as truly outrageous and disgusting.
Yes, ma'am.
Very large overreach of power the past couple years through a medical emergency, quote unquote. And I understand many countries are getting ready to possibly give the WHO full power.
Oh, why wouldn't you? I'm just joking.
So,
You
Bad
saying
joke.
we can't trust the World Health
You
Organization?
can't trust them?
or the UN.
The UN. I can't even make a funny on that. There's nothing funny about that. But sorry, finish.
Well, so what are our plans to help stop that? Does Congress have any control over giving that power to the WHO?
Yes, it does.
Yes, we need to be out of the UN like 15 years ago, right?
Right.
Why we're still there. You have, I think it's the UN bureaucrat, last name Griffiths, who said that Hamas is not a terrorist organization. They're literally building tunnels under UN buildings. Your tax dollars that you could actually be using for your family, to grow your business, is supporting terrorism. Yeah, it's not right. And the world, I don't know what you're alluding to with the COVID crisis, but I'm going to just say this.
Well, the WHO.
If we didn't learn something from that about what our government did, and if we didn't learn something, hopefully the government will learn something from that, because I don't think the American people will stand for that again. And that's one thing I want to stand with this man in Washington against, that, like, that there's just a group of elected officials of us on the conservative side that just, we're not going to stand for that. And I don't think the American people are going to stand for it again either. Like, that's not okay.
Yeah, we ought to defund all of that, and I've got a bill to do that. All right, we got a question here and then one over here.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit. My wife is a director at a charter school here in Utah County, and often she comes home and describes the restrictions that the federal government, through the education department, ties her hands and it almost makes it so that she is not able to run a school to educate our children here. I would like to know your feelings about the education department and what you will personally try to do to remove those restrictions from the federal side.
See, I'm thinking of the Constitution. I'm going through Article 1, no, 2, 3. Why is there a Department of Education? It's unconstitutional. And it's not very complex. So, and I hope we all, and like in my beginning when I spoke, or maybe it was at the end when I was talking about this concept of small federal authority, large state authority, I call it the sacred state authority. The more important something is to us, the more personal it is. The founding fathers understood clearly that you need to keep that authority at the local level, your families, your communities, your states. You don't delegate that to the federal government. You don't need New York and California making laws for you. And once you started taking that federal money, which is unconstitutional, then there's always strings that come with it. They usually will taunt you with it and make it look good and very enticing. And then once you go to the federal government, you can't undo it. It's like crack. And then all the sinister stuff starts moving in. So,
Have you ever tried crack? Just don't
Cracker
answer,
Jacks.
don't answer that.
Cracker Jacks.
Yes, sir.
Yep, go ahead. That's a good looking shirt, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The hat's not bad either.
No, you make it look good.
As far as I'm concerned, far from what I understand, the Federal Reserve has nothing to do with the United States of America. And if you people want to know what the debt is, we buy our money from the Federal Reserve at face value plus 1%. The debt is the 1%, not the deficit. The debt. You think about that. What are you going to do? And as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to get rid of the Federal Reserve. They have too much control.
Sounds like we have an Austrian here. Yeah, well said. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Somebody over here has had their hand up for a while. Yes. By the way, where are we on time? Oh, is this the last question? Okay.
So
Hopefully,
I'd
if we didn't get to your question, Jason will be around. I'm sure he can answer it.
love what I'm hearing. Very curious in how you as a freshman senator is going to be able to persuade the rest of the Senate. And Senator Lee has been campaigning this and been working with this for years now. How are you going, what's unique about what you're going to do to persuade the other Republican senators to be able to, you know, let's do the right thing, because we're not doing the right thing, as Senator Lee said before. And then how are you going to get rid of the U.S. Department of Education?
That's a tougher one. So I'll start with that second one. How are you going to get rid of the Department of Education? I'm going to lobby for it. But I think maybe the answer to the first one will tie into that as well. I'm not like anyone else who's running for the U.S. Senate. There's not very many people with I'm unaware of anyone currently that's running for the United States Senate with my background in America right now. So again, I'm not a politician. The only commitments that I've made are to my wife, my family, and my God. That's it. And then to you, the people of Utah. That's it. So you asked me how I'm going to get it done, and I feel like I sound bragging, but since I'm applying for a job, I'm going to be direct. I started a business in my garage. How many of you know that went and started businesses and had grandeurs of high hopes? I built it in one of the largest pest control companies in the country without any outside investors. The reason, if you haven't done that, then you don't know what it takes to do it. You have no idea how hard. You're guessing. And I don't mean that rudely. I'm just saying it's hard. The reason I'm saying that is because the way you do it is you come up with a specific vision of what you're going to accomplish, what's clear in your head. And then you arrange capital and human resources that you manage while you're scaling something to bring that into reality. And that is the exact skill set, near as I can tell, how you get stuff done in the Senate. The question is what's your ideological base? Because you don't want to send someone to the Senate with my qualifications without a good ideological base. I don't need to wait till year 2, year 3, or my second time around. I want to go jump in feet first right now to do what I already have been doing for my whole career. There's nothing I think I could have done better that would prepare me to learn how to get things accomplished conservatively. And yeah.
Stop Stop bad bills. Pass
Yeah,
good
stop bad bills. Stop bad bills. But I think look, right now you have a state that has Rand Paul and it has Mitch McConnell. You have another state that has Ted Cruz and it has John Cornyn. And in Utah, you've had Senator Mike Lee and another senator. So, Mitt Romney. So imagine, I want to be respectful. I'm running for the man's office. I disagree with how he votes, but this is the upper house of Congress, and it's that, speaking respectfully, is I think what you should expect from someone who's running for that seat. I clearly disagree with him, and it motivated me to want to run. But imagine what would happen if you had two conservative senators who are constitutionalists, who are friends, who see things the same and have the exact skill sets that we have. One of the best constitutional minds in the world, and a little bit of something that's fairly rare, what I've accomplished in business, working for Utah. This isn't the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives, it's done by population. This is the Senate. Every state gets two. Your Utah senators are just as powerful as your two California senators. It's not a 1+1 thing when you get two doing the right thing that are working together in the Senate. It is a multiplying effect. It would put Utah in a very powerful position, not just for the state of Utah, but moving policy for the entire United States of America. I think I'm uniquely positioned to do that. I don't know anyone with my background that's running for the United States Senate.
Jason, thanks so much for inviting me to join you tonight. And thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. You're going to hear closing remarks from Jason here in a minute. And if we didn't get to your question, he'll be here for a while afterwards. Is that okay for me to volunteer? I've had a lot on my mind today, as my first and only granddaughter was born today. And thank you. And I've heard from a number of candidates today. I've been watching them over the last few months, and I've spent some time with 4 candidates today at events like these. And for some reason tonight, I can't help wonder, this image keeps popping into mind. Imagine Donald Trump talking about Jason. This is sort of how it would go. Jason Walton started in his garage, formed the biggest, most impressive pest control company in the entire world. Huge. He walks into a house, okay, even a big house like mine, Donald Trump's, and he says, "Those bugs are huge." But Jason Walton says, "Yes, but I'm bigger." Right out of Central Casting, Jason Walton. That's what Donald Trump says about people who are good. But in all seriousness here, this is important business, and that's why I'm so glad that you're here listening to this candidate, as I'm sure you have been with others. In fact, I've seen a number of you at other events today. And I will tell you, it's not every day that we have this opportunity in our state to represent, to choose someone who's going to represent us for the next 6 years in the United States Senate, where there's an open seat. And there's some characteristics you're going to want to look for in this. And we've seen a lot of those on display today. You certainly want somebody with a strong commitment to the Constitution. You've certainly heard that. You've heard you want somebody who can explain why the Constitution matters and how it's impacted them when it's been followed, and even more importantly, when it hasn't. You've heard that. You want somebody who's a happy warrior, somebody who can deliver the bad news, but with a smiley face, and with a smiley face, not to minimize the severity of the problems, but to say, "Hey, I'm here and I want to help, and let me explain to you how I'm going to help." And you want somebody who's excited and energetic about it, and who has endured difficulty in his life, and who wants to share his ability to solve difficult problems with that. I think you've seen all of that on display abundantly tonight, and this is you're a rare talent, sir. So I taught Sunday school with him when he got into the Senate race. I didn't know what kind of candidate he would be, but I do now, and I'm so grateful that I know, because you're an exceptional and rare talent. So thanks for letting me be a part of this. This has been a real experience for me, and it's caused me to tear up at times. Thank you.
Wow, that's I used to play this game called Humble Chair, where you'd sit there and people compliment you, and it feels good. Thank you for those kind words from someone who I have so much respect for. I said it earlier, and that Senator Lee I can't tell you how inspirational he was to me in realizing that there are good people fighting the good fight, honorable people, principle-centered leadership, people of character. And it was a motivation to me to say I want to fight alongside this man, work alongside this man, serve alongside this man. And I want to do it for the people of Utah, and something that I believe passionately in. That is the United States of America and our future, and the Constitution, and preserving the values that made it possible for America to exist, the greatest nation ever. We don't need a new Constitution. And I've said this before. If you've heard me, if I was a paid consultant for one of our enemies, I would say they're too strong to attack their military. So what you want to do is attack them at their foundation. Make them think the Constitution's out of date. It's obsolete. The founders didn't see our day. All lies. Make them think capitalism is evil. Right? Make them think that these Marxist ideas, sneak them in, DEI, ESG. Sneak them in so that you start believing in them and destabilize the country. And then that way destabilize people so that they think their vote doesn't matter. They're demoralized and they think there's not a solution. I'm here to say that these things aren't true. And we have the greatest nation that has ever existed. We just need to wake up. We are under foreign attack, not just by the left, but by our enemies abroad who are trying to attack our foundation. And that's the divinely inspired Constitution and this divinely prepared, inspired nation. And I can't think of anything that I'd be more honored to do, if you'll have me, to go represent you in Washington, D.C., to fight alongside my friend Senator Mike Lee, to preserve our life, liberty, and property. Our life, liberty, and property. And as like I said earlier, if I get maligned, attacked, it's a badge of honor. That's getting stuff done. You're being attacked for standing up for true principles. What's more honorable than that, getting things done? And so ways that you can support, if you'd like to, and I hope that you will, go to Walton for Senate. You have that on Instagram, you have it on X, you have it on my website, and come stand with me. You can stand with me through making donations. You can stand with me for just making comments, follow along. Those of you that are delegates, get ready to come with me to convention, call other delegates, and just say that there's a new time coming. We're going to elect other entrepreneurs like me, like my friend Bernie Moreno, who just won the Republican nomination in Ohio. I'm telling you right now, we're going to retake the Senate. We are going to keep the House. We're going to defeat Joe Biden, and we are going to elect Donald J. Trump to be the 47th President of the United States. And the first vote that I cast as a United States Senator is going to elect new conservative Senate leadership. Thank you for coming.